Hey, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. I'm Dan Saunders. I'm the head of performance marketing for Ingenuity Digital, and I have the privilege to talk to you guys about Amazon and host what's really going to be an interesting event. I've spoken to our panelists and our speaker today previously before, and I think there's a lot of really interesting facts that's going to come out. So we're just going to start with our panelists and our speaker just to do a little bit of introductions. They know themselves so much better than I know them, so I wouldn't be doing any justice for them whatsoever. Kiri, would you just like to give yourself a brief introduction?
Sure thing. So I'm Kiri Masters from Bobsled Marketing, and we are an Amazon specialist digital agency that has worked remotely for the last 5 years. So all of this is sort of business as usual for us. And I also contribute to Forbes Retail as a columnist there, host a podcast called E-commerce Brain Trust Podcast, and have written a couple of books about Amazon as well. So this is what I love to do all day, every day, and today get to do it with some very interesting people with different perspectives. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for making the time. Just so people know, it's actually 1 a.m. Kiri's time as well. Throughout, guys, as well, if you could just drop us a note in the comment section of where you are. Always interested to see where everyone's is and how everyone's doing. And please feel free during the presentation just to throw us some questions. We're happy to answer those as we go through. Elizabeth, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well, please.
Sure thing. So my name is Elizabeth Marston. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Marketplace Services at Tenuity, which is a long title to encompass a lot of different things. So I work directly on the marketplace team, but my previous roles were all in paid search. So I actually in 2006 thought it was called pay-per-click marketing, and I was totally into that. I Googled it. Turns out that's not what I thought it was. The rest is history from there. And I am based in Seattle, Washington. So I am the exact opposite of Kiri. It is like 10 a.m. Pacific. So sorry, Kiri. Thank you.
Maybe the paperclip marketing back then was, remember in Microsoft Word, they had little paperclip help
Yes.
guide?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of what I might have thought of that, but yeah.
Like it. And yeah, it's really interesting places: Thailand, India, Colorado. Yeah, more power to you guys for being awake with us all, and especially making the time to speak with us today. I'm going to let my co-author Anders introduce himself, because as much time as we spent together, again, he knows himself a lot better than I do. Anders, if you'd like to talk us through who you are.
Absolutely. So yes, I'm Anders. I avoid pronouncing my last name for people just to spare you, because it's too difficult to remember. Anyway, there are so many nationalities probably connecting. That's not a problem. I'm Danish, but I actually live in Paris, France. I've been here for longer than I actually lived in my home country. And I've been doing digital marketing most of that time, actually. So I started back in the last century. I did some PPC as well. It's funny how PPC is actually a term that is pretty much North America, whereas in most of Europe, we use other words. I came from search as well, just as Elizabeth. And I've had the joy of discovering Amazon over the past few years. Basically, I've worked in digital marketing ever since its inception. Created a couple of agencies, and eventually a couple of years ago sold the last one, which is now part of Accenture Interactive, and started Innovel. And Innovel has sort of a mission to discover or uncover digital marketing insights and redistribute, share it with as wide a public as possible. And that's why we're really happy to be here today. And so we wrote this report with Dan, but I'm gonna let you present yourself as well, Dan.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I won't take up too much time because these guys are the experts that I'm really interested in hearing from, and I'm sick of the sound of my voice already. I've been working in Amazon since 2012. I set it up as a side business to supplement my own income. So I've seen Amazon from its very inception in terms of what marketing or paid marketing looked like then as well. And as I say, I head up the performance marketing team at Ingenuity Digital. We are the largest independent digital marketing agency in the UK. Again, enough about me. Let's get into some actual insights for you guys to learn and take away. Any points, feel free to tweet as well. Send us, tag us in with Semrush or Semrush, depending where you are. And Anders, I'll hand over to you to start your presentation.
Yeah, I actually learned that I think the name is Semrush, but I think Kate disappeared, so we should have asked her before we started. Let's get on with it. Marketing on Amazon. Things are a bit crazy these times. I talk about us living in a VUCA world. VUCA for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I think this is sort of a term that is winning people's ears. There are protest movements. We're starting to use face masks. I was considering actually putting one on, but the sound is not so good with one on. Climate change is hanging over our heads, literally. We've been through lockdown. There's terrorism in parts of the world, and we're, I think, starting to come into a deep economic recession here. So, how do you actually manage all this? Well, Amazon are managing pretty well. If you can see sort of the way things are evolving, it's only getting better all the time. This is actually updated from, I believe it's updated from today. They have never been so high. Just while we're here, that's my Twitter handle down at the bottom. I actually tweet while I present. I've scheduled some of the tweets so that you can find some of the articles that I link to. First off, a little bit about the Amazon setting. So the graph that you're seeing is the growth of Amazon e-commerce. This is both their own e-commerce and the marketplace. The peaks are, of course, Q4 every single year. And the growth is pretty steady at 20% year on year, every single year, 20%. So we tend to forget that when we're working in digital marketing. We're working with Google, Facebook, Amazon. It's all massive growth every single time. 20% is incredible, and they're still doing this. But they're even doing better than that, because part of their offering is around 40% growth year on year. That is AWS, Prime, Amazon Ads, and stores. So let's have a brief look at those. So this is one of the articles that I'm tweeting, any second now. There are these 4 growth riders, and I tried to put in some hashtags. It's about technical innovation. It's about the future of retail. It's about marketing innovation, and it's about advertising. And those things are pretty much defining, as I see it, some of the direction of Amazon. These things actually represent 32% of Amazon revenue as of Q1 2020. We look at Amazon Web Services first. I call this tech innovation. Cloud beats rain since 2013. This is Google Trends, and of course, there aren't any. This isn't climate change. This is cloud computing, which has gained a lot of popularity. And even if you look at it sort of quite recently, even more, this may be again COVID-19. Amazon are sitting on the places where things are happening. Very powerful on tech innovation. They're also quite powerful on the future of retail. So they are leading the way with some of the these cashierless stores, and they're actually now licensing that technology out to other retailers if they care. There's some marketing innovation, and a very powerful one actually, called Prime. Every time I talk about Prime in a presentation, I ask people, can you please raise your hands if you're using Amazon? That's sort of like everybody, and then raise your hands if you're using Prime. Sometimes it's like, you don't have to do it. Right? You can if you like, but I'm not going to be able to count how many of you. Typically, I see people in these types of crowds. 75% are Prime subscribers. That is massive. And often I ask a question to these subscribers. I ask them, do you do that thing of just before buying a product, going onto Amazon just to check the price, just to check if you can get it quicker, just to check if they have an alternative? And most people actually say, yes, we can, or yes, we do. So I really like this. This quote is from the report. It's Nick Weinheimer from Kenshu. Saying Prime is probably one of the most genius moves in business history in terms of customer loyalty programs. I mean, you're actually paying to be in the loyalty program because that has value. And then there's, of course, advertising. So here's a recent article where we're talking about, and I think we used this in the introduction for the presentation of the webinar as well. So the poker analogy of when you do advertising on Amazon, it's a bit like a game of poker, because you really have to consider which cards you're betting on, whether you play or don't play. The winner takes not necessarily all, but the winner takes a lot, and there are quite a number of losers as well. So I've found that analogy quite interesting. There's more about it in this article, and of course in the report as well. So a lot of these things come from the research that we did together with Dan Saunders, a report called Marketing on Amazon in 2020. I'm going to show some extracts from it. We interviewed 7 experts. We did a deep survey of 20 Amazon marketing teams. When I say deep survey, we're talking 20 minutes of SurveyMonkey. So we got a lot of data from them, which I'm really happy for. And thank you, Elizabeth. You were one of the people actually participating in this and bringing a lot of value there. Some of the experts we interviewed, I'm going to show you a couple of extracts here. We asked the question, who's winning on Amazon? And this is Adam Pachewski. We used to work together in Group M many years ago, and he's now the Amazon lead for Philips. He gave us this sort of really quick, everything's in this quote here of how to win with Amazon, how to work with Amazon. But the thing I wanted to extract here is that notion of it's always day one. There's no past. We're only looking forward. We're only looking to the future. I think this is very valid in today's environment, because you really have to look into the future to figure out what you're going to do with Amazon. There are some other examples here of how to work well with Amazon. I think there's a lot of test and learn. We found that in the survey and also in the interviews. Working on Amazon or succeeding on Amazon is about testing and learning all the time. A second quote here from Evan Fassinger about power relationship. Who's winning on Amazon? Well, Amazon is winning. I actually saw some fascinating output just recently over one specific category where a tool was monitoring the number of sellers and the proportion of views. So this is like you do a keyword search and you look at the search results and who are in the auction. And basically, once the lockdowns started, there was suddenly an increase of number of players. So the cards were spread. It's like a 40% increase in number of players in the search results, and then gradually there was sort of a reshuffling of the cards. And I think this is something that I'd love to get input from both Kiri and Elizabeth on whether you've been seeing the same kind of thing. Reshuffling of the cards, and actually at the end of sort of quite recently, the one taking the larger share of the search results is not the one we had before prior to COVID. In this case, it was actually Amazon taking something like 50% of the results, basics or essentials there. So this sort of goes to illustrate that relationship there. Well, you're sometimes a little bit maybe in the lines. Then you've got to be careful what you're doing, what you're showing. One last quote here from Megan Habold, also from Kenshu. It used to be the power of the brand name. So this is sort of in the beginning of Amazon, brand was very important. If you had a brand product, you would stand out and you would sell a lot. After that, it used to be throwing money at it. So a lot of advertising was enough. Just any advertising, just throw money at it and you'll be top of search. This has changed again. So Megan says, what you really need to do today is a dedicated focus to the consumer experience, and consumer experience all along that user journey. So it's a bit of storytelling. Maybe we can talk about that later on. All of these quotes were in the article that was published on Search Engine Land. But again, this was prior to COVID-19. We in the report we tried to sort of look at decrypt a little bit how marketing on Amazon works, and we used this model, which is from the 1960s, was when the 4 Ps of marketing were created. There was the product, there was the price, the place, and the promotion. Now, all of these things play into marketing on Amazon, but the difference here 2020 is that with Amazon, they become variables. Price is not something that you set once. It's something that varies. Your product is not something that is just set. You need to change it. You need to update. You need to position it. And in terms of the place where you're actually putting this, in terms of brand store, the keyword territories, well, that is shaped as well. And the last factor of variation, which is maybe the one that we're the most used to, is of course the promotion of it, of the various advertising solutions that you have available within Amazon. I wanted to give a quick look at this one. So we looked at the Amazon algorithm. What do you need to do to rank? So we tried to put all the factors in there, make a picture of it with three big areas: the customer experience obsession on one hand, the product attractivity on another, and finally sales maximization. I wanted to put in a couple of areas here because with COVID-19, well, there was suddenly the case of, well, out of stock, or no delivery, which kind of changed things. And as far as I've understood, there's been an algorithm update to take into account this challenger. The first thing that happened as soon as very often when there's a crisis, a lot of advertisers will suddenly cut advertising. They will cut spend. They can't take the risk. So there was a big shift there, and what I described just earlier about the big changes just around the lockdown is based directly into the algorithm. So there's a view we can talk more about it, but I think it's sort of a pretty complex issue to go through. A quick list of some of the major things that happened when the lockdown arrived, and also prior to that when there was the uncertainty. There's been a reshuffling. So certain product types, certain verticals were prioritized, and everybody else was told to please wait, hold back, because basically Amazon wants to give priority to the basic needs. So that was the first sort of a reshuffling in certain verticals. The second thing is, of course, warehouse conditions. Certain warehouses were closed down to protect the workers or for other sanitary constraints, basically in the workplace. There were delivery conditions that fulfillment couldn't happen anymore in certain cases. There were these advertiser stops and shifts that typically happen every time there's a crisis. The algorithm update that I mentioned, and also the last thing here is if you look at the bigger picture, Amazon's role as an advertiser suddenly changed as well, because Amazon did what a lot of advertisers did. They cut their own advertising so that the Google auction, Google Shopping auction, suddenly changed quite radically. Dan shared this with me. So here's a view of an Amazon page when during lockdown. It is all about your problems, your confidence, and trust. And then it's all about toilet paper, coffee, cleaning products, and there was a Pepsi Max as well. And then when you take that view and you go post COVID, things are pretty much back to normal. Your Starbucks aren't there anymore, and you're back to electronic products and things like that. So the world changed, in a matter of weeks or of days from time to time. So that was my run through of the various issues. We're open for questions. I'll hand over to Dan.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, Anders, that was a really detailed presentation. I really appreciate the thoughts into that, and all the work that we put in for the marketing report as well. I think that's has been very, very useful to streamline my thoughts. Those that have had to deal with me in the past know that my mind is probably the most chaotic place in the world, and Anders managed to sort of focus that. Trying to talk him through what I do in Amazon was no easy task for him. What I'd love to do now, because we've got quite a few really interesting questions that I want to go through. But first, I really want to hear from Kiri and Elizabeth to talk about, what do they feel in terms of this, in terms of Anders' presentations, and what points you'd like to pick up on first. So if we could start off with Elizabeth first, and then we'll go to Kiri, if that's okay.
Sure. So presentation wise points that I kind of tend to hone into is like that new normal, right? So we say post COVID, but is it really? Like we're what will we see rinse and repeat again here very shortly? And then I think later on we'll probably going to talk a little bit more about future proofing against that, like what happens on. History shows us there's another wave coming. So that's what I'd probably like to pick back up on.
Perfect. No, that does sound very interesting. It was quite an interesting point because it took me a while to try and find those, because the first slide that Anders showed was obviously the first thing. That was probably day 3 of the UK lockdown versus what my shopping cart usually looks like. One of the big things that I found with Amazon, and where it's really set itself apart, and when it took over from Google as the main e-commerce platform, is that it managed to personalize the full experience. And when you were searching for something, you'd have multiple options coming through. People that bought this product typically actually left with this product, and it was that sort of marketing that I think really spoke to buyers. And the key points there for me were that they allowed this to change. And this is where Anders talks about the algorithm update, because we were seeing products that none of us had ever previously looked for being pushed to the forefront of, you may also be interested along here, or people also bought this as well. So that's a very interesting point that I think we should pick up on a little bit later. Kiri, have you got anything that you'd like to add onto that in the initial point phases?
Yeah, I think there's a I'm sure that lots of people in the audience follow Scott Galloway, who's a retail a tech commentator, and he likes to categorize winners and losers from these kind of scenarios that we're in. So I think a winner in this scenario is Amazon Media Group. Just their advertising division is so strong, so profitable, such a great value add to brands who are looking to get in front of more eyeballs, especially under stay-at-home orders where people are browsing more, comparing more, utilizing online methods to do research and transaction behavior in ways that we've never seen before. And to boot, it's an extremely profitable part of Amazon's business, potentially right up there with AWS. So Amazon's going to win no matter what, because more brands selling on their platform, more advertising, and really profitable revenue stream at that. And I think that the losers in this situation are those sellers who are using a reseller model and are intermediaries between a factory and Amazon. And I think that during this time, as more competition is coming in, both from below with low-cost entrants, from Amazon's own private label brands that they're releasing, there's over 400 of them, and then also from big brands who have finally had their come to Jesus moment and started really investing in their Amazon channel as well. There's competition coming from all sides. So if you don't have a point of differentiation on Amazon, a real brand that is drawing customers in, life is going to get harder and harder for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's you actually released an article in Forbes a little while ago about startups coming into the market as well. I think that actually leads quite well into our first question. We've got a question here around, how do we think that Amazon will help when you're a localized business? I think this feeds really well into, Kiri, what you were talking about in terms of your grocery startups that you mentioned in your article. Yeah, there we go. The question's at the bottom of the screen there. Yeah, who wants to take a stab at this one first?
Well, this is an interesting one, because I think it's going to depend on which market you're in, but Amazon does, at least in the US, have a service component. So if you buy a TV on Amazon, you can also arrange for Amazon to come and bring a handyman out to install it. So it's going to be very dependent on the type of business that you're operating and the what you're selling.
Yeah, Elizabeth, Anders, have you got anything you'd like to add on that?
Yeah, well, localized can mean many things. I think there's, if you're a business running on one of the, so there are many Amazons, right? And it's actually one of the challenges is if you're running on one Amazon, does that mean that you will be working on another one as well? Some are easy and some are difficult. As long as you stay in the English language, there's a lot of things that you can just tweak and adapt a little bit. When you go into other languages, you're also in front of other cultures. You're in front of words do not translate directly, and so I've seen some people on LinkedIn sometimes say, "Oh, this fantastic new feature where Amazon will translate your ads automatically to another language," and I'd stay away from it. Stay away from it, people. Don't do it. Don't do it. Google Translate. Don't do Amazon Translate. And you have real people look at this. Yeah, I mean, you're talking to customers. You're talking to people you're trying to tell them, please buy my product. So if that's a machine talking, it's going to sound metallic. Yeah. Anyway, so localizing is not easy. I think it's one of the bigger challenges, and I think Amazon. So that maybe there's another facet to the question, which is what kind of support will you get in local countries? I know in Europe there are. So how many Amazons do we have? We have the biggest one being the UK, and then we have the German one, the French one, and then there's the Italian one, and then they just opened the Polish one, and there's the Spanish one, right? So you potentially have different people there, and then if you're in a market which is not covered by one of these, you have to think about where will people actually go there to get stuff. Really complex and really difficult issue, but I do go. I agree with the point of saying, well, it's a new market. Every time you sort of want to localize into a different country, you need to take it as a completely new market opening. I don't think there's any sort of automatic, let's just try this. I don't think you should just try sort of just to see how it goes with anything on Amazon. I think you need to be really structured and prepared before you do anything.
If I go to the base question, how will Amazon help you if you're when you're a localized biz? The answer is they don't. Not really. That's not where I would go as a localized biz. Is my first place to grow in the same way that I think they're thinking.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've got a couple of accounts in the US, a couple in Canada, mostly around the UK and Europe, and even trying to launch a product. As I mentioned to you guys yesterday, we've got a product live in France, but to have our own store name in Germany, we have to re-register through the German system, and that's just a barrier there. But Amazon says that it will help you through that. If you're a UK business, Amazon's got a lot in place to try and help you sell in the US. It actually encourages you to sell in the US and to help sell in Europe as well. It does obviously offer its own translation service, but as Anders says, do not go anywhere near that. If you take one thing away, is always have native language speakers with your translations, because as Anders said, you are speaking to people, and we need to think about that every step of the way. Amazon will always look out for Amazon, but it'll also help you if you're good at selling and you can sell. That helps Amazon, so it'll look after you for that. So yeah, Elizabeth, I really think that's the best. Yeah, I love the answer to that question. It won't help you, but it will help you grow, so you're not just local.
They're not set up like that's not their main business line when you think about it. Like it's ancillary, so you kind of getting, it's not going to be the number one feature. Yeah, definitely. We've got a really interesting question from Christopher Cardi, actually, in terms of third-party Amazon tools that we all use. I know I've got a fair few, and there's some with me that you probably wouldn't expect, but I'm more interested to hear what you guys use, because I talk way too much, and I've talked too much already.
Well, I'll jump in there. So at Bobsled, my agency, we leverage third-party tools for most of our processes, because machines can do things these days that just better than humans, and faster and cheaper and more efficiently, and sometimes just better quality as well. So I think one of the first things that you should look at to automate or get some computer involvement is advertising. And there's lots of tools out there that are available for large, medium, and small sellers. The one that we're partnered with is Kenshu. And then I think going through the value chain, you can look for product catalog management solutions like Salsify, which you can use to upgrade your content across lots of different platforms. And then I'd also be looking at brand protection and alert tools to see other sellers who are reselling your products, if you're losing the buy box, things like that. Amazon has a habit of developing these kind of solutions internally in their native system, but often the third-party tools are better right from the beginning. And one example I would call out there is repricing tools, which have been around for a long time. When Amazon released their own version of it, just not as good as what else is out there. So yeah, there is a tool for everything. I think just go through the value chain of what you're doing on Amazon, everything from advertising, content, brand protection, operational processes that could be automated, and there is a tool out there for almost everything.
So for us, right now I'm actually working on a project evaluating share voice tools more than anything else, and it is kind of interesting because the questions that you have to ask will like have the same questions that you want to ask for each one of those tools. So like those base questions. So mine are like things like, how often do you collect this data? How, are you ingesting it once a day, twice a day? Are you scraping it? Are you connected to an API? Because that tells me about the volatility or the fragility of the data and how often you may be able to actually produce that. And then ask things about like brand, whether or not they're able to separate by brand or non-brand or categories, that kind of level of detail. And that'll help you understand across the board what might be the right tool for you.
That's a really, if I could just riff on that for a second, Elizabeth, that's a really great point. And something that's recently come up is around the API. And vendors now have access to an API as of May.
Like a few days ago, right? Okay, yeah, it was really recent, right?
Yeah, really recent. And that's something to remember as well, as we're kind of talking about tools available for sellers on Seller Central, which has a much more rich ecosystem of third-party applications. We should really take a moment and feel sorry for those poor large vendors who sell wholesale, because they have they have had nothing for a really long time. And now I think that Amazon's just released an API for vendors very recently. We'll start to see a lot more third-party tools, which is very exciting for them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from my perspective. Oh, sorry, Anders.
No, I was looking through some of the results from the survey just to look at what we had there, and there was there was few of these teams that say we don't use any tools. Very few. There was like 40% were using just one tool. And then a lot were using 2 or 3, and then somebody was using 7 tools. And I think that some of the expert feedback we also got was tools are essential. And as you just said, I mean, tools are essential to be able to automate things, to make all these repetitive tasks go quicker. But we also heard the sort of the pain in there of the economic model in some of the tools, which is just not sustainable if you're an agency. So there's sort of the need for a lot of tooling. Doesn't seem to be a lot out there that can actually cover everything at a reasonable rate. So a number of teams are also building their own in-house. So it's interesting, Elizabeth, that you're actually looking through that now.
So we have a bid management platform or campaign management platform. The nice thing about that is that flexibility allows us to not only do we connect to the Amazon APIs, but we are then able to take that information, put it in a data warehouse, and we say, okay, it's going to be surfaced in our UI, or we're going to hold it in this data warehouse, and then we're going to build some sort of custom or be able to connect to different reporting capabilities, like whether or not that's a Tableau or a Data Studio or whatever it is. That way the client doesn't have to change their tech stack. more than anything else. And that's for the enterprise. But when I think of, Anders, to your point on the survey, when some folks are saying they're only using 1 or 0, we see that with a lot of the smaller sellers because, to your point, it's not cost effective after a while. When when you're paying monthly fees for 3 tools, or you're paying by data load or number of keywords, that adds up really fast. So I would say if anywhere you can bundle is always a good thing. There are various tools out there that have like multiple aspects of it, and sometimes it's an add-on to a main feature set. But the question is then I always ask is, well, what are your plans for the next 2 to 3 years? Are you only going to be in Amazon, or are you looking to go beyond? So if you're looking to go beyond and add additional channels like multi marketplace management, then these tools start to make a lot more sense and more cost efficient.
Yeah, definitely. It very much onto your point, Elizabeth. Actually, when we're onboarding or preparing a proposal for a client, it's asking them, what are you going to be measured in? When you have to send your weekly report to your boss, what do you know? And one of the last customers that we took on actually feeds in nicely with Semrush or Semrush, as I'm told now. We can actually refer to them as both, so always good news. They have a really useful tool that helps them because my client had a big issue in terms of conversion rates. They couldn't, for the life of them, work out why the conversions, and it wasn't really until Semrush brought in Celery that we could actually test that as well, because it was very much a manual process, which the more times you go in, the more you're gonna shake things up. But yeah, a lot of what I do is based on asking them, what is it that you have to report? Because we can send report after report. We can send the Amazon report. We can break it down ourselves. We can send the Excel data. But at the end of the day, if you present to them in ways that they understand, we care about sales, we care about this, then here we go. That just makes perfect sense, and that sort of feeds into the tools. And obviously, with us being an agency, we've got an access to quite a few, but it's about sharing those as well to share the data. I'm just going to move on to another one that I think actually, Kiri and Elizabeth, you'd be probably better to talk about than I am. Hans has got a question in terms of e-commerce in the USA. Do we think that Amazon is breaching anti-monopoly laws? Now, my gut instinct for that is probably not, but I'll leave it to you guys. You're more of an expert in the US than I am.
So there was a lawsuit filed yesterday in Seattle, where I live, against Amazon. It is a class action lawsuit. It is, but the plaintiffs are consumers, not sellers. So that's kind of interesting. So it's totally, I highly recommend it as a flip through. The complaint is 53 pages, but if you look in the citations, you will see search engine land. You will see the Tunity blog. You will see Seller Co, I think, is in there too. So I wouldn't be surprised if one of you also had an article cited in there. So when we say, and it is based on pricing and monopolistic practices. So I'm personally not supposed to comment on those kind of things, but I can say that there are 2 law firms out there and a bunch of plaintiffs that think they are, and they filed something to that effect.
Interesting. I love that answer. I wish I'd have had forethought to answer it like that myself.
I can send you the link. It's public. It's a federal court filing. It's public.
There was also last year, US Congress made an inquiry into Amazon's practices, and it really spanned the gamut from AWS practices to how Amazon compensates authors publishing on its Kindle platform. But a big section of the report and the inquiry was into Amazon private label brands and how Amazon arranges search results and whether things like Prime eligibility impact search results. And so the answers to those questions were very PR-ified, and legal counsel has that very safe, yes, and very specific usages of search terms, terminology there. So I think one thing that came out, which Amazon denied, is that they were using internal search data and sales data from products to develop their own private label versions, cheaper generally. And this is a big painful point for many brands. for example, I'm using a laptop stand called the Roost stand. It's great. And then Amazon comes out with a knockoff version of that, and it's half the price. So as an example, well, how does Amazon know that? They must be looking at the sales of the Roost stand. And Amazon denied it flat out in this report back to Congress. But as it turns out, a couple of weeks later, there was a report by the Wall Street Journal with some sources from within Amazon saying, yeah, we do use the sales data. There's ways around it to get that kind of analysis. So I think that
going over the fence.
Going over the fence. Yeah,
like
exactly. Ask this analyst and pretend it's for this. And so I think that Amazon, just due to the size and nature of the company now, it's really, they might have good intentions, but it's sort of impossible to contain human behavior where people's jobs are on the line to increase sales or do this or do that. But there's certainly room for improvement there.
Yeah, we'd say, and that with not a lawyer.
Yeah.
I would say that if you want a historical context, the thing that we would probably most look at is 2000, I think it's when Microsoft faced antitrust litigation from the government. That is probably our next closest. I think after that we have to go back to like Rockefeller Steel, basically. But that's probably the most digital equivalent today.
Interesting. Funnily enough, actually, just following on from Kiri's last point about trying to focus points in regards to with us being in quite turbulent times. That actually probably leads us nicely onto our next question, which is more of a technical one, which hopefully a lot of people get a lot of use out of as well. We've got a question here asking about, during these turbulent times, when you've got a higher ACoS with some of your campaigns, is it better to lower those bids dramatically and let the campaigns run, or just turn them off? Who wants to jump in on this one first? I mean, I will go, and then feel free to pick apart anything I say, because it's a very typical SEO answer, I'm afraid, and it depends.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, no. In all honesty, for me in these sort of time points, Anders and I were talking when we were writing up the report. We were speaking to people that were having ACoS levels of as high as 40%, and again, it comes down to, as long as you're making money off it and it makes commercial sense. One of the big things that we are going to see is that Amazon does tend to reward historical data. So if you've previously sold quite well with this product, if you've kept on backing your own sales during this time, my personal opinion is that it would probably be best to keep them running, because in the long run, it'll benefit you in that sense as well, in the fact that you'll still get sales coming through, and the more sales you get through, the higher you'll rank on the organic side of things as well, and lower your ACoS in that sense. I appreciate my answer to everything is keep going and keep forward with it. But I appreciate when you've got to look at your P&Ls, it's a bit difficult to sort of say, oh, this ACoS has gone from 5% to 40% in the space of 2 weeks. What do I do with it? Again, it's looking at the data from my perspective. If you say, okay, this actually could be a good time to sort of look into those keywords and say, what sales am I actually coming from these keywords? What am I actually getting from here? And then try and refine it down a little bit. What I call, and what Anders actually and I called, was the grind. Let's try what you've done in terms of your ACoS spend, in terms of letting Amazon choose your keywords, and then find those that are working for you. You'll know which ones are working better for you, and then target those. Whatever's converting for you right now, focus heavily on that, but try not to forget everything else that you've done, because in the long run, if they help your sale, they will help your sale going forward as well. And that's my non-SEO answer of it depends.
Well, and I mean, I'm a fan of the always on in some capacity. So like that grind plus, you don't want to just turn it off. Because here's the thing, it's still a second price auction. So impressions don't cost you anything. Whereas, I've been working with a lot of the newer retailers recently, and it's a first price auction. So my answer would vary very differently depending on the platform. But obviously this is Amazon. So I would honestly, Dan, I agree with you.
Excellent. It's always the danger in our business. If you put yourself out there with an opinion, someone's always waiting with a knife just to no, it's not a comment.
I'll wait till later afterwards. I'll just be like on Twitter, like with that Dan guy. I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah. What's this guy talking about? Has anyone else got any thoughts on that in terms of the ACoS levels?
I would just say be careful of pinning all your hopes and dreams on your ACoS, and it is one metric out of many that you should be looking at. I think in the example that was shared, it was like, what if your ACoS goes up for a very specific campaign or a keyword? Then definitely that warrants investigation. But I speak with a lot of brands who just want their ACoS to be, well, as low as it can possibly be, of course. But that's not really giving your brand or your products the best shot of actually getting in front of new to brand shoppers or people who might have searched for a more generic keyword than what you've been targeting. And the truth is, if you want the lowest possible ACoS, you can get that by using extremely long tail keywords related to your brand that are so specific that no one ever thinks to search for them. And you'll get your target ACoS of 2% or whatever you want. But think what is the actual goal that you have, and ACoS should logically follow that. It shouldn't just be, you shouldn't always just be chasing the lowest ACoS possible at all times.
Yeah, 100% agree on that.
I'd give it two angles. One is, I mean, you can, if you take it back to the poker analogy, you can consider it a chicken run, yeah. Because some are going to drop off. So maybe if you're the last one to drop off, you're going to survive there. But whatever you do, you should probably do it quickly. So I'm like, well, the question comes too late. I mean, this was at the beginning of the lockdown. It's like, well, if you're still struggling with that, then you should have done something a long time ago. And so there's going to be a collateral damage if you turn it off. Yeah. So you'd like, well, if I don't bet on this anymore, I'm sitting down, taking it off for 30 days. I would have to rebuild the whole history of sales and build up and sort of take those battles with everybody else. If you stay there, you could be having to sort of live out that high level for a long time. So it's actually back to Dan. It's like it depends on your, but not on, it depends not on the technical stuff. It depends on your economic situation right now. If I, as a business owner, I wouldn't, and as many do, and as actually Amazon did themselves as well, a lot of people just slash advertising. As soon as there is too much risk, slash advertising and say, okay, we're going to have to just start over and reboot the whole system. And that, look into the future and say, okay, when will I restart? It's not an easy call to make at all.
No, it is. It's very difficult to learn that. Interesting point, actually. Question from Jason Barnard. How much do you think the algorithm update during April and May were aimed at preventing machine learning from being derailed by some of these random unique searches that we were coming through? So if we go back to what my personalized search history was, I've never bought Starbucks coffee. I've never bought toilet roll from Amazon before, but all of a sudden these are coming up on my would you be interested in this sort of phase. So that to me is quite an interesting point. Is it more of a protective measure that Amazon put in place so it didn't, so when we do think, well, what is post-COVID life going to look like, not to mess with the algorithm? Is it something that is put in place? Interesting question. And yeah, I'm interested to see what you guys think about
that. To my knowledge, the protective mechanisms that were put in place were to ultimately curb the number of overall orders on Amazon. So they took away a lot of the recommendation engines and the upsells. But I'm not sure to what degree, obviously there was also category limitations and category restrictions that we saw. I'm not sure to what degree Amazon would want to prevent, very specific user activity, but there was certainly a reduction in the number of programs designed to upsell and get people spending, getting more packages shipped out to them, essentially. What do you think, Elizabeth? with the algorithm?
I mean, so what I take the question to mean was a little bit more, were changes made because it's a machine, right? And I think in this COVID era, what we saw was somebody threw a wrench in that machine, pretty handily. And so what those responses were to either anticipate and meet the need and or suppress flaws in the system, which I think we saw come out pretty fast and pretty hard. And one of the things I have noticed with machine learning in general is, the machine is only as smart as you feed it. And then we went in and gave it a whole bunch of crazy information, and I'm sure it derailed it to some extent. Like they had to make manual adjustments. I cannot see how you couldn't. I mean, there's no reason that March should behave that way. Like, no. So yes, I do think they did have some never before seen metrics in terms of volume and some user behavior. So at Tunity, we did a few studies internally. We do know that clicks were up in general. And this is actually an article on our Tunity blog that our director of research put together. And he examined number of clicks, click-through rate, and then conversion rate in comparison to that. Obviously, what we saw is, clicks are up. So people are searching for something, but we didn't see conversion rate fall in step with that all the time. So the question was, did they find what they were looking for and then leave, or did they find something else and then buy it? And we found in most cases, like if the conversion rate drops like that, they weren't finding what they need. So that means that somewhere they weren't finding what they wanted. So machine learning wise, something would have had to change. I mean, because there's no way they didn't see that on their end and then make a change. If I'm understanding the question correctly.
No, I agree with you on that one completely. Sorry, Anders, you were just about to say something.
Yeah, I was about to say that. So machine learning sits in various places. Like it sits where. So Kiri mentioned how how the actual recommendation engine works. So maybe they turned off things because of going berserk. In terms of the machine learning on the basis of user behavior, they could continue doing recommendations on the basis of the same behavior, even at a lesser degree. What would derail the system, but it wouldn't really derail it, but what would sort of make it less performant was all these new queries that were being searched for, which totally changed the game. So I don't think they changed the algorithm on that basis, but there's something else which I noticed happened. So I mentioned earlier when I showed the slide on the algorithm that one of the areas was basically the user obsession. Do you get the product? And I actually saw this on myself on the screen. You could go in and you would search for something, particularly a technology product that you would normally get on Amazon, and which they had then they were not prioritizing, and suddenly you would see all sorts of propositions for this product. But when you went in and clicked and actually wanted to buy it, they couldn't deliver. And this happened. So this was a wrong user experience. And basically what I think in this area was that the algorithm never imagined that there could be a flaw in sort of immediate delivery. There could be a flaw, sort of low quality delivery and all these perfect order performance criteria that weren't good enough. But they never considered that people could actually not deliver. I don't think that was part of the algorithm. So this was the unexpected. And I think that was where there was a real algorithm update that happened. And it probably, just happened behind the scenes. It's just going to improve their preparedness for next time we're in lockdown.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about the future-proofing aspects of what we could do with this. One last question, I think, because we'll end up running short on time. Katie Mitchell, she's a smaller brand selling on Seller Central. What are our thoughts on getting an agency's assistance versus looking into third-party tools and managing it more in-house? I know I've obviously got my own opinion of these, so I'll let you guys go first, and then I'll chip in towards the end.
I think it just goes, it's back to that earlier point I had about what's your 2 to 3 year plan. If you are looking at only through 2020, a couple third-party tools, manage in-house, continue how you're doing it today. But if you're looking at what kind of growth you're looking at to achieve, you may need help.
Yeah, I agree. It's about context here as well, and I think that from what I see, speaking with brands, they usually have an internal capability around operations or around the marketing and advertising side of things. So where are your own interests and capabilities? If you're a really strong operator, then maybe looking to shore up your advertising and marketing capabilities with some outside help is the right thing to do. Or conversely, if you're a great marketer and you really love digging into the weeds with advertising, then maybe look for some help with the operational side of things. So look internally as well.
And then actually, let me tag in one thing on that, the smaller brand. One, I'll call it a hack, way that I've seen smaller brands or smaller, like especially get help, interns. Internships are, I mean, it's great that you pay them a little bit, obviously, but the benefit hugely is for them with that hands-on keyboards experience, because then when they're done, they go get a job and they get a good job, and so they're very happy to learn that with you. I've done that before, where I get a third-party tool and I give it to the intern and I say, okay, you learn how to use this, and then you tell me how we're supposed to do it, and then we evaluate from there, because they'll have that time to dig in and ask hopefully good questions.
That's a great hack. There's a I haven't actually personally used it, but I've been really impressed with their model. It's called Acadium, ACADUDIUM, Acadium, and they're all about the digital apprenticeships for interns and apprentices who are getting into SEO, something like that, and they'll come on board with a specific skill set. So I haven't personally used it, but that fits in with what you're saying, yeah. Elizabeth. Yeah.
I just do a few bullets, like I ask like what their Excel proficiency is, their digital proficiency in general, like, have you used Amazon? Let's start there. Do you know, like, hey, I think the best thing I ever got on an intern resume for an application was, the best bullet I ever got was Xbox skills. They were proficient at Xbox.
I mean, that's an important skill to have.
It's an important skill to set. Yeah. I actually didn't call him, but I did call the one that was a World of Warcraft guild leader, because that shows organization and attention to detail.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, you can't argue with that. That is something that I'll neglect on my CV, because I sucked so bad at World of Warcraft. Anders, have you got any points in terms of the agency versus in-house tools?
Yes, absolutely. It's a great question to get also, because it's out there all the time, and there are trends of in-housing and then outsourcing and in-housing and outsourcing, and it's also what people tend to forget is it's all about the learning and the speed. So what my suggestion or my advice to this person would be, write a brief. And whether you give it to an agency or not, write a brief. Can you get all this down on paper? It goes back to what Elizabeth said as well. Do you have a plan? Where are you going? What are your pain points? And then go out once you've got the brief. Maybe send it to an agency and say, guys, do you think you could do anything for me? And if you send to these three guys, they will say yes or no. They'll say, well, we'd like to have a look at it, or they'll say, this is not for us, because agencies need to agencies are never going to earn money if there isn't a success for the client. So basically, write a brief, write it down, make it really detailed. What is it you want to achieve? What are your pain points? What are your doubts? And if it's a question of tooling, well, write it down as well and go out and test the tools. I mean, most of the tools out there can be tested for free. It takes time. And it takes structure, and many times an agency will be able to provide you with that, but they will actually be much more happy if you can, be very explicit and very clear about what your objectives are. It will help everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from my perspective as well, it's like Anders and Elizabeth both said, it's about your P&L at the end of the day. I know it sounds horrible. It sounds very much like I'm an accountant. I'm not. It's what you can afford to do, plus where you want to be. But then you've also got to consider your time effort. If you think about how much time you spend on your Google ads or traditional SEO on your actual site, can you then replicate that into a different field, which is Amazon? Have you got the time to do it? And if the answer is no, you're time poor, then I'd say in that aspect, get an agency. If you feel like you've got time on your hand, there's a lot of tools out there and a lot of learning guides as well. Anders, I've just seen that you've just tweeted out the marketing report. You've just tweeted out a discount code for the webinar as well. So it's a learning report. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I co-authored it as well, but in that sense as well, in terms of learning, if you feel like you can do it yourself, if you've got the time, then test, learn, rinse, repeat, because that's how I learned how to do it. And then again, if you don't think you have time, like Anders said, put your thoughts down onto paper, where I am now, where I want to be in 2020, what's my 3-5 year plan, can I do it myself? Yes, no, pass it on to an agency, because yeah, if you want to grow, again, biased because I work agency side now, but I also have my own Amazon products that some that I would say I'd probably need to hand over to an agency to have time to deal with my own personal life, but others where it's just a small product, just iPhone chargers. It's something like that it's just nice and easy just to do, and you can do in the background as well.
Yeah, you're a dad now.
Exactly. Yeah, I should. I've just sort of, if anyone can see me sort of looking at either side of the screen, it's because I've got a dog hiding out one side, and I've got a wife and a little boy just sort of chilling out. So I'm kind of waiting for the world to collide on me. It looks like we're running very short on time. I can think of like 1,000,001 things I want to talk to you all about as well. If anyone's got any questions that we've not managed to get to yet, if you could send them to the Semrush guys, we'd be more than happy to answer. I can see a few more around ACoS, more about how to juggle your campaigns, more into how we feel the algorithm update works as well. So yeah, the Semrush guys have put in the live chat an email address to send your feedback. If you can send any questions on there that we've not managed to answer, feel free to send them through there. Reach out to us on Twitter or LinkedIn. We're more than happy to answer your questions there. I just want to get the final thoughts from everybody here, because I don't know about everybody else, but I've really learned a lot, and it sort of helped me focus my thoughts. So if we just go, we start off with Anders. Have you got some final thoughts that you want the viewers and listeners to come away with today?
Yeah. So some of the things that we realized during the report, some of the things that I said about. I meet a lot of people who are thinking, well, should I be going on to Amazon? No, a lot of people haven't seen this coming, actually, so which is kind of wild. So why should I go on Amazon? Why should I base my digital strategy on Amazon? Well, first of all, it's 10% of e-commerce. Yeah, so are you interested in that 10% of the market? That's one thing. Second thing, I think I mentioned it in the presentation, it's a huge source of innovation. If you want to be where things are happening, you probably need to be on Amazon. There is a question of the user journey. There's Prime, and there is this whole Amazon obsession where people go there for product search. So user behavior has changed. People go there to search for products. Amazon itself has a lot of data, a lot of insights that can be used either for advertising or for you to learn what's good for your product. Look at reviews. Yeah, that's really good. And it looks like they're kind of future-proof. I mean, they're pulling through this brilliantly. And the last thing I'd say is I'd like to quote Frank Sinatra. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And that's my closing comment.
I thought you were going to go down the my way route, but yeah, cool. That sounds good to me.
No.
Elizabeth, have you got anything you'd love to add?
I'm not as cool as Sinatra, but I would say one topic that we had thought about that we didn't quite get to was Prime Day being moved to September and prepping for that. The other thing I would mention with that is remember that there's a halo effect. So whenever there's a Prime Day, it affects all digital channels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Prime Day is outstripping Black Friday. It's something that I really wish we'd got time to speak about. Again, any questions about Prime Day, please feel free to send them on to the Semrush guys, and we'll be more than happy to answer those as well. Akira, is there anything you'd like to add as well?
Yeah, I think another thing that we wanted to talk about but didn't get around to was the storytelling content opportunities that Amazon has now, and just look at the investment that Amazon's making in the bandwidth for carrying live video ads, posts, all of these rich sort of content, immersive experiences. And I think that's a way differentiate on Amazon, if you're prepared to put in the time and energy to create really engaging content, you're going to be light years ahead of your competitors.
Yeah, I completely agree. One thing that I'd love the audience to take away is the secret to winning on Amazon is sales. I know it's chicken and egg, but if you're selling, you are always going to win on Amazon. Quick win for me is an outside source. So I have tagged quite a lot of my products on Depop. I don't know if you guys have got that in the US, but also on Pinterest and on Instagram as well. If you can drive sales to Amazon from from an outside source, you are going to rank so much higher than everybody else on that as well. And that will probably be the royal flush to keep in terms with the keep in terms. And now, one last quick question for each individual in here, keeping in with our theme of the poker games changing. I'm going to ask if you're going to raise with Amazon or if you're going to fold circa 2020 to 2025. So, Kiri, what are you thinking? Raise or fold?
Oh, raise for sure.
Anders?
Raise.
Elizabeth?
How do you not?
Yeah, exactly. If anything, I'd say, I mean, again, I'm biased because I'm an Amazon geek and have been for nearly 10 years now. I'm all in at this point. If you're e-commerce, to me, it just makes sense to be on Amazon right now. US, EU, going into the Australias, it's taking over the world, and you can either be on its side or you can be in its way. And on that very cheery final thought, I'll bid you all adieu. Thank you very much for tuning in with us, no matter where you are in the world. Good evening, good night, good morning, have a good day, have a good sleep, whatever it is for you guys. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.